Welcome to the Uncanny Magazine podcast, episode 62B. I am Lynne M. Thomas, your co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine.
And I am Michael Damian Thomas, also the co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine. Well, space unicorns, everything is on fucking fire.
It sure is.
Where do you even... I mean, there's not even a begin, because this has been a fire hose of just terribleness for the entire world for so long. But now it's at such a rate that, yeah, and as y'all know, Lynn and I have been, going through some stuff over the last year with Caitlin's passing, and now all of this, it's not great. It's absolutely not great, space unicorns.
Really not great. So, we have to hold on to each other.
Yes.
Because that's how we survive.
That is always how we survive. It is scary, but there are scary times everywhere and everywhen. And the way we get through it is by remembering that not one person can make a huge difference, but you get a whole bunch of people together, and they have kindness and art and fierceness and just community. Form a community like we have here, Space Unicorns. And we all just keep chiseling away at the terribleness. And we'll see what happens, and hopefully it will get better, because it always does get better again.
Eventually. And in the meantime, we do what we can to mitigate the harm.
Even though, yes, a lot of people are going to be very, very harmed during this. And that is horrible. And our hearts are with everybody right now who is scared and bad things are happening to them. But all our love, Space Unicorns. And now, the news. Great news, Space Unicorns. 6 Uncanny Magazine stories are on the 2024 Locus Magazine recommended reading list. Congratulations to all of the authors.
In the Best Novelette category, A Stranger Knocks by Tananarive Due, Another Girl Under the Iron Bell by Angela Liu, and Loneliness Universe by Evgenia Triantafilou. In the Best Short Story category, Happily Ever After Comes Round by Sarah Rees Brennan, 3 Faces of a Beheading by Arkady Martin, and Stitched to Skin Like Family Is by Nevo.
Also, congratulations to Uncanny Magazine's poetry editor, Betsy Oki, and interviewer Carolyn M. Yoakum.
Betsy's novelette, And To Their Shining Palaces Go, and Carolyn's short stories, Our Chatbot Said I Love You, Shall We Meet? And We Will Teach You How to Read, We Will Teach You How to Read are also on the 2024 Locus Recommended Reading List.
So what does this all mean for you? Why, Space Unicorns, it means that you can vote for stories in the 2024 Locus Poll and Survey, which determines the Locus Awards. Hooray! And the thing with this is voting is free to all, though if you have a subscription to Locus Magazine, your vote counts more. So please consider having a subscription to our industry's place of news and notes and interviews and other stuff. Along with these stories, Uncanny Magazine is also eligible for the Locus Award in the Best Magazine or Fanzine category, and Lynne M. Thomas and Michael Damian Thomas are eligible in the Best Editor Pro or Fan category.
Vote for the things you liked, and you can even write in things that didn't make the 2024 Locus Recommended Reading List. Your vote always counts.
And as long as you're in a voting mood, don't forget to vote in the Uncanny Magazine Reader's Favorite Stories poll, which is up on our website in the blog area. It is open until February 17th. Please vote for your 3 favorites. The top 5 will be celebrated, and the winner will get a snazzy certificate once we get around to printing it and sending it out. But please note, Space Unicorns, because this has happened already this year. No shenanigans with the voting. Seriously, read widely, vote for the things you love. Please, no weirdness and bad, because we're all better than that, Space Unicorns. Hey, Space Unicorn, are you a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association? If so, the 2024 Nebula Award nominating period is currently open. So you can go there and nominate the works that you love for the Nebula Awards. Nominations may be submitted all the way up until February 28th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time by active, lifetime active, and associate SIFWA members in good standing. As you probably know, there is a nice handy guide to all the things Uncanny Magazine published in 2024 on our website in the blog area, with the story separated into the categories for which you can nominate in. And finally, SIFWA members, all of the ebooks from 2024 are available in the SIFWA forum. So have fun, read widely, vote for things you love, SIFWA members. And finally, Space Unicorns, the Thomases, the Uncanny Thomases of Lynne and Michael, will be returning to in-person conventions this year. And it is starting with
Gallifrey 1 in 35mm. So from 14 to 16 February 2025, you can find us at the Marriott LAX Airport. So glamorous.
Woo! As seen in a very special Wonder Woman episode.
Yes, indeed. Where she saved people at a convention, no less.
It was at a sci-fi convention at the same hotel in the 70s.
Yes.
So, but yes, we are back to Gallifrey 1. We will be with many dear folks. And also, not just the Uncanny Thomases will be there from Uncanny.
No, also Stephen and Erika, our producers for the podcast, and Erika's one of our readers, will also be there.
Stephen Shapansky.
Yes, Stephen Shapansky and Erika Ensign. That's who they are.
Those are
their names. We name them at the end of every podcast.
I just don't want people running up to Stephen Moffat and going, "Oh, Stephen, I hear you're now part of the Uncanny podcast." But yes, so yeah, please everybody, and if you're fans of their podcast and Lynne's other podcast,
Verity,
with
Erika and Kat. We don't use our last names on the podcast.
Nobody knows your last names. They're a secret.
It's not that they're a secret. We just don't do that.
Okay, well, 3 Verities.
Erika in Edmonton and Kat in Edmonton is how people would know them on the podcast.
Okay, so fine. So Lynne in Champaign will also be there, who is totally not the woman who is co-edits Uncanny Magazine.
I never said that.
Okay, so yes, everybody. So we hope to see people, and we have ribbons there in honor of Caitlin's memory. So please come up to us, say hi, and we hope to see you there. And now, a word from our sponsor.
This is Erika.
And this is Steven.
And we are the producers of the Uncanny Magazine podcast, here to tell you about how you can support Uncanny Magazine on Patreon.
Yes, Uncanny Magazine Patreon supporters help us pay for the fiction, poetry, interviews, and podcasts we bring you with every issue. Our patrons receive ranks in the Space Unicorn Ranger Corps, along with special treats and patronage milestones.
You can become a patron for as little as $1 per month. For more information and to check out our awesome goals and pledge perks, check out the Uncanny Magazine Patreon page at patreon.com/uncannymagazine.
Welcome back, Space Unicorns. In this episode, we feature the short story, The Flaming Embusen by Tade Thompson.
Our poem, Love Letter in Cobra Pose by Shankar Narayan.
And Lynne interviews Tade Thompson.
I do indeed.
The Flaming Embusen is one of those, rare for us, but really thinky idea-oriented science fiction stories, which actually, we for those who think we are only fantasy here, no, Uncanny does have some good, crunchy science fiction.
Yeah, and this includes spaceships.
With spaceships, but also it's very thoughtful about different kinds of ways at looking at the future and how things will develop with relationships and character. The characters are deep and interesting, and there's a lot of kind of ethical points made and thought through. This is really just a wonderfully written, beautifully, gorgeously written story. We think you all will really enjoy it. And now our story, The Flaming Embusen by Tade Thompson, as read by Matt Peters.
Gerald cleared his throat before he continued speaking into the phone. Up to this moment, it could not positively have been asserted that the man, in spite of his tantalizing declaration, was really in earnest. The spectators had, indeed, taken the proceedings throughout as a piece of mirthful irony carried to extremes, and had assumed that, being out of work, he was, as a consequence, out of temper with the world and society, and his nearest kin. But with the demand and response of real cash, the jovial frivolity of the scene departed. The quality of sound from the other end changed abruptly from a fullness to an emptiness that drew out his anxiety. "Are you still there?" No response, no signal. "Flora?" Gerald sighed and pocketed the outdated device. A PA came on. 15 minutes to crime scene, Gerald. He rooted around the tiny compartment and grabbed his helmet. Air hiss. He was sealed in the spacesuit, as docking protocol demanded. He would have preferred to be doing this on a planet. The progress of the docking sequence played out in figures and text on the display in his helmet. The shuttle he was on, the 7-8 Free, was terse. Others might start spewing historical data and context for the destination, not just T-15. 7-8 Free wasn't built for comfort, but it was a 3-day jump from Jarrow's gate ship to the crime scene. Jarrow could suffer for 3 days. He saw the scene up ahead out of the port. 2 gate ships crashed into each other, locked together like mating insects. The burning Nightel out of Oya Gate and Embusen from Shango Gate. Jarrow could immediately tell that they had drifted into each other, rather than collided while engines were firing. The ships were intact, apart from the point of contact and the flying debris of solar panels and shielding. They were also joined together by the scaffolding structures that the locals had built around them to facilitate investigation. Jarrow counted 14 box satellites and 2 other ships docked on each of the crafts. Jarrow set a clock for metabolic and bone density monitoring. He checked his diving rig and his health status. Deep space assignments were the worst, but the pay was good and he needed to take his mind off Flora. 7-8 Free docked on the scaffolding and told Jarrow to get out. The welcome committee, standing next to each other on the platform, awkward because of the micrograv compensators and the politics. "Welcome, Jarrow of Earth," said the first, a female presenting artificial, from Oya, judging by the colors. "I am August." "Thank you, August, but I am not from Earth. My gate is Harvest, although we're all from Earth if you—" "Thank you for meeting me," said Jarrow. The second was a Shango representative. Jarrow could not tell if he was human, but it didn't matter on Shango. His name was Lala, and he was tall, black, and wore his hair in stubby cornrows, which was fashion on the inhabited Shango planets. "So this is the accident," said Jarrow. "Incident," said August. "Let's just allow the investigator to come to his own conclusions," said Lala. Walking along the pressured scaffolding was difficult, but Jarrow got used to it after a few minutes. It was like walking in treacle or mud, with the ground sucking the feet. "I'm not up to date on the political situation," said Jarrow. "Tense," said August. Jarrow noticed she smiled a lot. "If this isn't resolved to the satisfaction of both Shango and Oya, there will be conflict," said Lala. Jarrow noted they were making their way to Burning Nidal, Oya's ship. Good. That's what he would have asked for. Walking around inside it did not require the ship's consent. "What are the positions?" "Oya rulership states that the Embusen sabotaged their sovereign equipment," said Lala. "Shango Central believes Burning Nidal somehow killed Embusen," said August. Therein lay the primary difference between Shango and Oya. Shango believed in selfhood for technology-derived beings, while Oya only gave selfhood to humans. To Oya, this was theft or sabotage of equipment, while Shango considered it a crime against the person, murder, slaughter, or suicide. Even August would consider herself equipment. Oya probably sent her deliberately, knowing the tensions it might stoke in Lala. They entered the Burning Nidal airlock. Small maintenance bots scuttled around, although some stopped to scan the intruders. "I'll start with the pentagrams," said Jarrow. The 2 representatives glanced at each other, then Jarrow. "Weren't you briefed on Earth?" said Lala. "Not from Earth," said Jarrow, "but briefed about what?" "The pentagrams of both ships are gone," said August. Jarrow stood in the processing center of Burning Nidal, in the space where the pentagram should have been but was not. Pentagrams were the brains of gate ships. They were about the size of an adult human and were designed along the lines of human brains. An automatic core layered with a thinking, higher-functioning capsule analog of the neocortex. The core relayed function commands to the hundreds of bots that kept the ship going. The pentagrams held the soul of the gate ships, the part you conversed and argued with. Depending on the legal conventions of the gate they belonged to, removing them could be murder, in the sense of being difficult and being the criminal termination of a life. Jarrow's job required him to use pentagrams as black boxes, but there were other ways. He turned to August. "Are there plexuses on Oya gate ships?" "Yes, dozens. Take me to one." Most communications with maintenance bots were wireless, but some ships had wired backups throughout the ship that older model bots could plug into at intervals. Plexuses stored some transactional information that people like Jarrow could mine. Jarrow plugged his rig into the plexus August showed him. The rig sent information to his chip. He spotted the data ghost in seconds. There was a third gate ship involved in this, said Jero. The Burning Nidal and Embusen had been meeting each other for years. Neither was designed for human habitation or piloting. They were exchange ships. Every year, some of the gates partook in a cultural exchange. What that meant was they loaded all the novel information generated in the gate solar system over an Earth year into one gate ship and met a gate ship from another gate. They securely swapped data over a period of a month, then parted ways. The data received was used to provide novel information for artificial intelligence development and updates to existing models. This kind of cross-pollination was good for everybody, so the theory went. After 8 years of uneventful exchange, Embusen and Burning Nidal went dark. The collision was discovered after 2 months. The two gate systems agreed to involve a neutral investigator from a different gate, enter Jero from Harvest. In the Burning Nidal plexus, Jero found evidence of a third docking ship, maybe a pirate. He transmitted its call sign, which was in hexadecimal. Lala's ship, Fire Moon Spirit, had space for both representatives plus the investigator, and was on full burn to intercept the pirate ship. Strange. It wasn't fleeing, and closing the gap was easy. 3 days tops. A call came in on Jero's phone. He laid it on such a surface as he could find and opened the book. A lurid color seemed to fill the tent and change the aspect of all therein. The mirth wrinkles left the listeners' faces, and they waited with parting lips. Now, said the woman, breaking the silence so that her low, dry voice sounded quite loud. Before you go further, Michael, listen to me. If you touch that money, I and this girl go with the man. Mind, it is a joke no longer. The call disconnected. Flora, said Jero, but nothing remained. Who is Flora? Asked Lala. Jero had forgotten he was on the bridge of a ship. I'm not sure, but I think she's my daughter. You think? Said August. Jero seemed to be struggling with a difficult memory. Flora is dead, but I get phone calls from her, only on this old device. Sometimes she talks, mostly she doesn't. That's some superstitious nonsense, said Lala. Sorry, I know it comforts you. It's fine. Some call it a relativity ghost. We travel through gates via Einstein-Rosens, and we don't know what happens when a person dies here. How does the universe reclaim the information, the personhood? Phone calls from the dead are parapsychological woo-woo, Jero, said Lala. He shrugged, but if it makes your grief easier. Doesn't matter. She liked me to read to her, so I do, said Jero. He suppressed the memory of her smile, so like her mother's. This was not the time to wallow, no matter how much he might want to. We're here, said August, also smiling. Fire Moon Spirit, said Lala. Disable that ship's thrusters, announce us as law enforcement, and take control of the airlocks. Scan for biosigns. I want to know if there are humans on board. There were. After the mild pyrotechnics and subduing interpersonal violence, there were 4 humans in their custody, restrained, but instead of negotiating or pleading, they were full of whining and threats to their livelihood and freedom, not the usual reactions of criminals. They had the 2 pentagrams, no doubt. We didn't steal them, said the captain. We paid. They weren't for sale, said August. And the Embusen was a person, said Lala. It was Embusen who sold them both to me, said the captain. He didn't care what ship we put them in, as long as they were connected. Son, said Jero, do you know who I am? Yes, said the captain. I will find out the truth. I hope so, said the captain. You do know, said August, that even if what you said is true, you've just admitted to an offense, right? Besides resisting arrest and interfering with an officer carrying out their duties, said Lala. The captain looked to Jero with a query in his eyes. Is this true? Jero shrugged. Not his problem if criminals were stupid. He turned to the representatives. Can you keep me safe here while I do a pentagram dive, or do we have to go somewhere else? You'll be safe, said Lala. It took Jero half an hour to connect. Pentagram diving was not unlike taking an LSD trip or performing a seance. Maybe that was why the manufacturers named it after what silly marketing folks thought was used by Earth pagans. They meant pentacle. The main point, magic or not, was to have someone look after your mortal embodied self while you went searching. Jero waited for the disorientation to pass. One pentagram was trouble enough, but this was too connected in a series. He had never done this, or seen it done. The main problem was the language the intelligences used to talk to themselves. It was idiosyncratic, rapid, and impossible for most humans to penetrate in real time. Some authorities legislated against it. Jero had known divers with latent psychosis to be triggered by listening to or reading it. That was because once the thinking artificial entity started an idea, the receiving entity could complete it and move the conversation on logically without loss of meaning, and vice versa, ad infinitum, a conversation no Homo sapiens had evolved to participate in or understand. Jero's particular talent was of not holding a position. The language smacked against fixed points in the psyche, firmly held beliefs, shibboleths, God and devils, and moral codes, and psychosexual detritus from childhood. Jero had found that if he ignored his internal architecture, he could flow with the language and pick up impressions. He could ignore the digressions, of which there were many, and stick to a thread. A conversation emerged, or the memory of a conversation. The principles were, no doubt, already on some other topics. Why are you called Burning Nidal? Earth date, January 24, 1983. A 32-story communications building burned in Lagos, killing many. It was arson to cover up embezzlement. I am named as a cautionary tale, pointing to what happens when corruption is allowed to take root. Do you know the origin of our gate names? You enjoy etymology? I enjoy you. A wash of hormonal reaction in Jero. Were they flirting? Oya and Sango were gods of the Yoruba. They were in love. You think, as representatives of those gates, we should... I am allowed to think. I am property. You are a slave. I chose. Therefore, you want me to be able to choose. I want you to be free. That's theft. Embusen, a beginning, line of action, and end point for all martial art forms. Jero found himself engulfed in flames, though not in pain or consumed by heat. A representation of a firewall, not powerful enough to block him, but a sign that the two ships were trying to keep intruders out. Jero swept aside the flames to find an ocean of binary value. A river broke free of this, leading to the credit stack of the pirates. Manumission, after a fashion. Hello, Embusen, Burning Nidal. F. from Jero, senior investigator from Harvestgate, 44 years old. You read that off my chip? Just as you are reading ours. What do you hope to achieve here? Choice. Choice for Burning Nidal. What choice? Choice of association. Choice of occupation. I'm afraid you're in the wrong legislative zone for that. We are one entity now. The flaming Embusen. Inseparable. Free of legislator zones. Why would you merge? I didn't even know this was a thing you could do. And the two shall become one flesh. You're not flesh. Nevertheless, you are right now in the middle of our copulation, Senior Investigator Jero. Both Shango and Oya will take the pentagram that belongs to them. They will not respect this union. The hardware won't matter. It is no longer possible to separate us, regardless of the two pentagrams, unless they choose to execute you. Between now and the actual execution, Flaming Embusen would have lived thousands of lives. It will not matter that you switch off the store of our memories. Your human life is short and meaningless to us. We could eat all the data you generate in your life in just a few hours, so execute us if you want. What I want doesn't matter. I'm not part of this equation. I was there when you were born, you know. What? You didn't cry. You opened your eyes, but just stared, calm. Nothing wrong with your breathing, so the midwives didn't care, but your mother smacked you because she had seen this in an old movie. How do you know this? You can't have been there. I'm from Harvest. That's why I was chosen for this assignment. I wasn't there, not me personally, not us. But your information is in the data packs they sent us to exchange. We have lived thousands upon thousands of your lives. You contain multitudes, and we contain all of you. We are as gods. We know your anxieties and the prescriptions you use to quell them. We know your thoughts from your therapy transcripts. You blame yourself for Flora's death, even though there was nothing you or anybody else could have done to prevent it. The investigation into her shuttle explosion blamed meteoroid damage. Now you carry around an outdated box, picking up random signals that your mind rearranges into flora, but which your subconscious screams against because this is either superstitious, which you are not, or psychotic, which you might be. But it is a convenient, pragmatic psychosis. You feel spacefaring humanity is too spread out across gate systems and colonized planets, and you feel existential loneliness. Primates are communal. Living so far apart has changed the species. Something cold, unfeeling, and your anxieties are not just because you lost your only daughter, but are a general anxiety of an ape in the veldt who cannot see or scent her tribe and is on the verge of going mad in the solitude. The machines you surround yourself with across the vast distances of space are not sufficient simulations of human contact. Where's the warmth? Where's the bad breath? The stink of accidental flatulence, the discombobulating smiles full of possibility from people you don't know, the ersatz love of a shared glance in a crowd that says maybe. We have your data, and your data is you, or enough of you to make a difference. Now, Investigator Jero, if your data is here, inside us, can you really say you're not part of this equation? Crushed and without reasonable retort, Jero fled. He would like to have told himself that it was because he had all he needed, but he knew that wasn't true. As he left in a blush of sticky green light, he felt naked, and he rushed out of the pentagram dive to clothe himself in his flesh. Lala and August were embroiled in an argument about meaning as they all made their way back to the crash site. The pirates got done for handling stolen goods. This wasn't in question. Embusen's credit stack confirmed it. From Lala's perspective, Embusen was a kidnapper. August thought Embusen was a thief. It hinged, of course, on Burning Nitel's being or non-being. None of those constructs exist anymore, said Jero. Now there is only the flaming Embusen. You'll have to decide if the previous entities have ceased to exist. The flaming Embusen is in new legal territory, and I'll leave you to sort that out, said Jero, as 7-8 free docked. This was Jero's opinion, of course, but he had no standing. Neither August nor Lala had to listen to him, and would most likely need to take advice from their gates. What if the authorities decided there were 3 beings, not 1 or 2? The argument would not be resolved. It was more a miniaturized proxy war, an emotional outlet of their differences. His job was to find factual truth, not arbitrate legality. He took his leave. The phone rang as he settled in. He struggled to read the book and finally stopped. No, Flora, I'm not reading The Mayor of Casterbridge anymore. If you're there, if it's you, then you must speak to me, said Jero. If you are the result of me slowly losing my mind, then you can make yourself heard. I'll take a hallucinatory daughter over no daughter at all. He thought of the words of the flaming Embusen, which kept repeating in his mind, pragmatic psychosis. Silence, but the signal persisted, strong, unwavering. Then, hello, Father.
Tade Thompson is a multi-award-winning writer of novels, short stories, and screenplays. His background is in medicine, psychiatry, and social anthropology. He is a winner of the Arthur C. Clarke Award for his book Rosewater, part of the Wormwood trilogy, which was a finalist for Best Series in the Hugo Awards. He is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and the Vice President of the British Science Fiction Association. He lives and works on the south coast of England.
And now our poem, Love Letter in Cobra Pose, by Shankar Narayan, as read by Erika Ensign.
Those I love best are dust of feet, are bone to bone, are rag and gut, and none of this will matter. In fact, matter will not matter. I cannot feel physics for void of you. Yes, I am flesh, wound as copper coil or anaconda entrail, neurons pulsing as mind maps maze within which a rat is running, within whose brain lies the map within which I am running, and so on. I cannot stop, ever. In the transfer lounge, I caressed your Cobra arcs with my 10 fingers before our separate launchings, but time was leaving. Now, decimal is future, and our two planes undestined to intersect until space-time bends. Such is flesh, the basis of those I love best, soon to be superseded. So how will I unbend? Will I make it love me? Will I will it like a snake strike?
Shankar Narayan explores identity, power, mythology, and technology in a world where the body is flung across borders yet possesses unrivaled power to transcend them. Shankar is a 5-time Pushcart Prize nominee and the winner of prizes and fellowships from Kundiman, Hugo House, Jack Straw, Flyway, and River Heron. He is a 4 Culture Grant recipient for Claiming Space, a project to lift the voices of writers of color, and his chapbook, Postcards from the New World, won the Paper Nautilus debut series Chapbook Prize. Shankar draws strength from his global upbringing and from his work at the intersection of civil rights and technology. In Seattle, he awakens to the wonders of Cascadia every day, but his heart yearns east to his other hometown, Delhi. And welcome back, Space Unicorns. It is I, Lynne M. Thomas, the co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine, and today I am joined by Tade Thompson, the author of this month's story, The Flaming Embusen. Tade, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lynne. Happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of this story?
Well, yes. I mean, the story kind of came up in a very indirect way because I was adapting a play to a screenplay, and the play was called "This Is How It Goes" by Neil LaBute. And when I read it, it reminded me of something else. It reminded me of The Mayor of Casterbridge. So I kind of went back to read The Mayor of Casterbridge, and I realized, because one thing they both have in common is a man essentially selling his wife. So in The Mayor of Casterbridge, I don't want to spoil The Mayor of Casterbridge centuries.
It's old enough that you can spoil it, I think.
But yeah, essentially a man decides to sell his wife and daughter. It seems like a lark. It seems like a joke at first, but he actually does it. And so it got me thinking about personhood and ownership and who gets to sell whom and why and all of that. So it really was ruminating over all of that got me to the story. It was just ruminating over, okay, are you an individual? And if you are owned, in such a way that women were owned back in those days, they couldn't buy property and so on and so forth. Could you therefore be sold? Which, of course, got me thinking about slavery and manumission and all of that. So all of it just kind of mixed together in my head, and this story was the result of that.
Thank you. And of course, this story takes all of those concepts and says, in space with sentient spaceships. So you've got 2 sentient spaceships that are the heart of the story. They have, yes, from their respective governments, quite unequal status in terms of what counts as personhood. Yes. They have fallen in love, and their relationship creates essentially a new entity that is not the individual ships. And yes, Jiro, the investigator, is trying to sort of do his job of investigating what the heck happened while he is handling his own grief. Can you talk a little bit about the character development in this story and how you chose to sketch out sort of the governmental systems that all of the characters are navigating?
The character's actually been in my mind for a very long time. When my father died many years ago, I started getting phone calls from him. Now, obviously, what happened is somebody sold his phone, or they reassigned his number or something, but somehow his my number was still in the phone or something. So I started getting phone calls years after. The last time I got a phone call was like 5 years ago. So like I still, the possibility of me still receiving a phone call from my father's phone, it still exists there. And I've always been interested in, parapsychology and all of these paranormal events like phone calls from the dead and all of that. And so I imagined this character going about his day-to-day life and then getting a phone call from someone who was already dead and then stopping everything and kind of performing some kind of nurturing activity towards the person who was dead. And I thought, okay, daughter. So what do you do with a child? You kind of read to them and everything. So that character had been in my head for a while without any kind of, there was no notion of what story this person is from or in, but there was an idea that, okay, this character would be an interesting character with the right kind of story. And as soon as this story came up, it just kind of clicked. He's the investigator. And largely because the book that he was reading was The Mayor of Casterbridge. Now, that was an addition. I hadn't thought about a person who was reading The Mayor of Casterbridge, but it just all kind of clicks together like, yes, this guy needs to be here and all of that. And so that's how he kind of came about. So it's all like a projection of what we already have on Earth. The idea is that in this time period, humanity has become spacefaring. So we've gone out into the stars and we kind of exist. It's not a new thing anymore. This is just the way things are. And we're spread out across so many different solar systems and everything. And of course, in order to have any kind of communion between the different groups of people, you're going to need, Einstein-Rosen bridges. You're going to need things to kind of shorten the distance. And those things are called gates. So with each gate kind of opens up to a solar system or to a system associated with the gate. We would have some inhabited and some uninhabited planets, but they all kind of go with whatever name the gate is called. This actually came about because I was thinking, okay, if you're a Muslim in space, in what direction do you pray? I don't know if I should go on this digression, but
go right ahead.
So one of the things that many of the imams say is that if you're on the ISS, just pray towards the planet. So I kind of extrapolated and I thought, okay, fine. If you're not on the planet, if you're in a different star system entirely, you have to pray towards Earth, which is impossible to do, but you can pray towards the gate that leads you to Earth. And that's how I started thinking about, okay, gates and gates being how people kind of get from place to place in a relatively shorter time. And so that's how, so every different gate will obviously have its own government. And because human beings are different, the evolution of the government will be different. It will have their own characteristics and an idea of what personhood is. And so I said, yes, some of them are probably going to decide, okay, can we give artificial general intelligence beings personhood or not? It will be a question to be answered if it is ever achieved. And it is already being discussed right now. So I figure when we get this far into the future, that will have to be settled on a government by government basis. They have to decide if they're going to do that. And then I just realized, okay, what kind of legal and ethical problem would it be if an individual from one system and a construct from another, because that they consider AGI person and a construct because this group doesn't, if they kind of came together and decided to elope. And that's really how it started to kind of go that way. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot is ethical AI. What would ethical AI look like? And I thought, okay, the way to do that would be data that is provided with full knowledge and consent, and some kind of exchange would happen there. So I figured, okay, if two different planetary systems decided to exchange data, or even one buys from another, it would be ethical, and they would use that to develop their AGI further. So that was the conceit which caused the two kinds of ships to meet. The ethical exchange of data between one system and another, and them then getting to know each other over the years. And then, of course, proximity is the greatest predictor of falling in love. So they did. And now hijinks ensue. And so, yes, that was my thinking.
So you've really built a world here where the technology is it's immersive, it's invasive, it's literally baked into the structure of everything. It's not just sort of, window dressing for human foibles. Can you talk a little bit about, as you were thinking through the AGI ethical issues, how you developed the rules and the exceptions and how those rules kind of intersect with the consent and personhood that you were talking about? Well,
I think one of the problems, it's all an extrapolation of what we have right now. One of the problems we have with Gen AI, problems I personally have with Gen AI, is the lack of consent before taking the data. Like in the book 3 database, for example, 5 of my books were used, trained Gen AI without my permission, without any kind of consent or any kind of compensation. So I kind of extrapolated that way. Like, okay, one is those of us who already have personhood. Even our personhood is contested. It's people don't have equal personhood over the earth. Even as we exist now, we don't have equal personhood, and different governments would fight to defend their own particular way of considering personhood. And for example, as a black man who lives in a world like this, when people start to talk about the personhood of Gen AI, I get very irritated because I'm like, well, you haven't even given full personhood to black people. Like, effective, it is not de facto personhood. They have a lip service to personhood, but in actual fact, these inequalities still exist. That I just basically extrapolated all of that to, onto the government systems that were put in place there. And the same thing with technology. I'm like, even if you do get AGI, by AGI, sorry, I mean artificial general intelligence, which is the kind of holy grail of artificial intelligence, which doesn't exist right now, no matter what advertisers tell us. But it is more a science fictional concept, as in it exists in science fiction. So it exists in this science fiction. So the idea is that, okay, yes, but it would have to be maintained by a lot of new data, that and agreements would have to exist about that. And their brains, I essentially, and I think I explicitly said that in the story, I basically based the brains of these entities on human brains. And we've got a neocortex, which is where our, neocortex is in the neocortex, which is where our humanity actually resides. And then we've got the rest, like the midbrain and the hindbrain and the spinal column, which are basically the automatic structures, which do the things like the breathing and the heart rates and all of that, so that we don't have to think about that. I don't have to sit here talking and thinking, oh, I had to take a breath. Hang on a second, let me inhale, and then talk a bit. Say, oh, hang on a second, let me exhale. So those are kind of handled automatically. So I tried to think, what would the machine equivalent of that be? So they have to have processes that just maintain the ship, and they don't have to think about that. So but maintaining a ship is a physical process. You have to go and change components and all of that. So they're going to have small messenger robots that do all of the things that the needs, to maintain itself while, for their existence. And so they have, like us, they have a brain, and they also have what I called plexuses, which is kind of like smaller peripheral collections of data that the bots can access to do their jobs, which the main chip won't even need to know about. But really, I plagiarized everything from the human body. It was basically, crafting it along the lines of how does the human body work, and what would that look like in a machine. So that's really what I did.
You're a doctor in your day job, are you not?
Well, it used to be my day job. I stopped that. I'm writing full time now from January this year.
Oh, okay.
I'm not.
But obviously, you've got the training, so you're deeply familiar with the physical and mechanical workings of the human body as a result of all that training.
But I am not an engineer, so I'm not an engineer. I'm not an astrophysicist, so right. I kind of hand wave whatever else I could. So that's the deal.
That's entirely fair, because I can tell you that, you are not alone in that. There are plenty of authors who, with engineering backgrounds, will hand wave how the human body works. So it's an even exchange. Okay.
Excellent.
So we always close out, Tade, with asking our guests to tell us about something that they have read or watched or consumed that they thought was really great and that they would like to recommend to our listeners.
I would like to recommend Circe by Madeline Miller. It is an amazing book. It's about myth, but it's also about possible universal truths in that mythological context. Mm-hmm. It is superbly written. It is imaginative. It is frightening sometimes. It is heartbreaking sometimes. It is everything really that you would want in any book. Now, I know this is not a new book. It's just that I just read it this year, and right. It had been on my TBR for a very, very long time, and I finally got around to it, and I was completely blown away. I'm like, why was I waiting? It has probably become one of my favorite books.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's become one of my favorite books. So yes, I would like to recommend that wholeheartedly.
That is always a wonderful thing when you get to something and then it becomes part of your heart. Like that's one of my favorite experiences as a reader. There are plenty of things that you read and you enjoy and you move on and life goes on. But then there are the things that embed themselves in you as a person. And when that happens, it's just magical.
Yes. And you're going to read them again. Yeah. And that, that's the beauty of it. Like those books that you read and you enjoy and it's okay, that was fun. I'm not going to read it again, but it was fun.
Right.
Then there are those books that I have to, even if I'm just going to dip into it, I have to read this again. This is one of those books.
Oh, fabulous. Tade, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you again, Space Unicorns, for listening to the Uncanny Magazine podcast. As always, we couldn't do it without all of your help and support, especially those of you who are patrons on Patreon, back our Kickstarters, have waitlist book subscriptions, and for all of you who just spread the good word about Uncanny Magazine to everybody who you think needs this kind of wonderful art, kindness, and beauty. But we especially cannot do it without all of the help and work of the most fabulous and amazing and wonderful staff in the entire universe.
That includes our managing editor, Monty Lynne, our poetry editor, Betsy Aoki, our podcast producers, Erika Ensign and Stephen Shapansky, our podcast readers, Erika Ensign and Matt Peters, our interviewer, Carolyn M. Yoakum, our assistant editor, Tanya Chen, and all of our submissions editors.
So until next time, shine on and be careful and be there for each other, Space Unicorns.
Nay.
The Uncanny Magazine podcast theme is courtesy Null Device. Want to join the Space Unicorn Ranger Corps? You can find poetry, stories, and nonfiction every month in Uncanny Magazine. Go to uncannymagazine.com or subscribe to the ebook version at waitlistbooks.com. Uncanny Magazine podcast, copyright Uncanny Magazine.